In a world swayed by distraction, how do we return to what sustains us? Today we explore the 4 timeless pillars that uphold both Dharma and devotion: mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, and austerity. When we speak of the Dharma of the soul, we're really speaking about the invisible architecture of the soul, those principles that hold life steady during the shifting currents. Bhakti teaches that there are 4 such supports: mercy, truthfulness, austerity, and cleanliness. Just as roots nourish the strength of the tree, these 4 characteristics nourish devotion to uplift us upward toward our divine friend. In the gentle light of these virtues, the noises of the world quiet and the inner being begins to remember its own song. Let's look at them individually. These are known as the 4 pillars of Dharma: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. Now, before I go on, I want to explain a little bit about Dharma, since some people may not be familiar with it. Dar means to sustain, and ma means me. So Dharma is that which sustains me. It's my true nature, my intrinsic qualities. Of course, here, me, or me, refers to the soul, not the temporal body. To help us understand, let's consider Dharma of sugar. Sugar is sweet. The Dharma of fire is to burn. These are unchangeable characteristics of these elements. If I find a white granular substance that's not sweet, it's not sugar. A young monk once asked his teacher, "What is Dharma?" And the teacher pointed to a river and said, "You see that river? It moves unhindered to the sea. Even if rocks block its flow, it moves on. That is its Dharma. It moves as it was made to move." The Dharma of the self is to love, serve, and give, and the self has a root source to which it's eternally connected. Combining these inalienable traits of the true self, we understand that we are loving, serving, and giving beings that need to be connected with our source to find our full expression. Love always seeks to ascend toward its sun. I spoke about how we come to these logical conclusions about the self in episode 3, and I'll include a link in the description if you'd like to understand how we arrived at there being a self at all and what the eternal nature of the self is. Because we're speaking about universal characteristics of the self, when we speak of Dharma, we're not speaking about a set of beliefs or religion or duties that pertain to my material responsibilities. We're speaking about reality that can be objectively and subjectively verified. For this reason, Dharma is a transcultural reality, because through a scientific method, anyone can experience the truth of the statement. Across cultures and centuries, sages have observed the same current of order, just like travelers tasting the same sweetness in distant pure waters. With this clarity, let's go back to discussing the 4 legs of Dharma: nonviolence, cleanliness, self-control, and being truthful. Just as the self naturally loves, serves, and gives, these qualities support the self's inherent characteristics and become fully manifest in a bhakti practice which awakens us to the self. And because these are universal characteristics of the self, we can say they form a shared, worldwide moral compass. Just consider how they're requisites for all the yoga paths, Buddhism and other Eastern systems as well. In other words, we find them at the heart of major wisdom traditions which speak to their universality. Isn't it heartening to see that what saints across lands discovered through prayer or meditation are the same truths that rest quietly in our own hearts? Now, these 4 pillars can be compared to the legs of a table. Remove one, and our life tilts away from balance because it throws us out of sync with our inherent nature. So bringing them out is essential for our lives and the spiritual life. They form the foundation of bhakti by both being the value and ethics. Let's look more closely at them and also learn their Sanskrit names. Mercy is daya, truthfulness, satya, cleanliness, socha, austerity, tapas. These are the ethical groundwork for one who wants to evolve. For those of you who are familiar with Buddhism, you know the Buddhist sila leads to detachment and insight. In bhakti, they also lead to detachment and insight, yet they further support loving service to the Supreme Person. As values, they represent universal principles that uphold righteous living. And in bhakti, they are not just moral guidelines, but are expressions of a deeper spiritual alignment because they reflect a purified heart oriented toward the Supreme Person's pleasure. One teacher once compared these virtues to 4 strings on a sacred instrument. When tuned properly, they allow love to sing the right melody. In this way, they form part of bhakti's ethics, not as ends in themselves, but as natural results of devotional, expanded consciousness. For example, in a very, very brief summary, mercy checks violence and selfishness. It's not just refraining from harm, but actively serving others by giving them spiritual knowledge of their relationship with the Super Self, the Supreme Person. Truthfulness upholds trust and clarity in relationships. It means not only being honest in speech, but also living in truth, understanding we are not the body, but the soul. And cleanliness supports the purity of mind and body. It includes external purity and internal sanctity through remembrance of our source. Austerity disciplines the senses, freeing one from material entanglement. It doesn't just refer to hardship, but voluntarily giving up sense gratification to serve the sweet absolute. Therefore, these values are symptoms of spiritual progress. I'd like to pause a moment to make an important point before describing these further. In Bhakti Yoga, ethical living is essential, but morality is not the final goal. It's a foundation for cultivating pure devotion to the sweet absolute. In other words, developing these qualities isn't the ultimate goal, but an important support for achieving our ultimate goal. These qualities align human behavior with the universal operational quality of nature called Sattva. In modern terms, you may think of Sattva as the mode of clarity, harmony, and balance, the mental and emotional state that supports insight, kindness, and higher purpose. Embracing these values isn't about repression, but about realigning with our true spiritual nature. Sattva gives illumination and brings happiness. It's the quality of nature that is conducive for spiritual progress. Now, each of these qualities supports the purity of consciousness, which is required for liberation. But we need to be clear that developing these qualities does not lead to liberation, but simply are a necessary support for a practice which leads to liberation. Krishna speaks at length in the Bhagavad Gita about Sattva, how to recognize it and how to cultivate it in our lives. I spoke about this in episode 7, and I'll include a link to that podcast in the description below for you. Let's look a little closer at each quality. Mercy, or daya in Sanskrit, is a queenly quality. It includes kindness, compassion, and nonviolence toward all living beings. When we say living beings, we refer to all that has life: animals, plants, trees, the earth, human beings. Mercy, kindness, compassion, and nonviolence are at the very core of love. Our loving attempt to connect with the sweet absolute will also manifest in relation to everything connected to him, and everything is connected to him. Guided by ahimsa, or nonviolence, bhaktas keep a vegetarian or vegan diet and avoid all hygiene, cosmetic, cleaning, and clothing products that use parts of animals. Now, nonviolence is so important that it takes precedence over all other rules and regulations. For instance, although truthfulness is a cardinal quality, one can even lie if the intention is to protect another from violence. If we can't control the mind and restrain ourselves from being violent with others, be it physically, verbally, or even in our thoughts, then we haven't even attained the most rudimentary platform of yoga. Some everyday ways to practice mercy are being forgiving, speaking kindly, giving time or resources to help someone struggling, and especially sharing spiritual knowledge. Further, bhakti extends nonviolence beyond physical harm. It means we shouldn't cause spiritual harm, and therefore we are to help others re-engage with their divine friend through an authorized process. As we work on freeing ourselves from material bondage, we're to help others. Therefore, true compassion is teaching devotion, because real suffering comes from forgetfulness of our beloved. Truthfulness, or Sattva, is more than avoiding lies, but to live in alignment with truth. It means employing a spiritual vision developed through genuine knowledge to be responsible, honest, and live with integrity. The yogi is to avoid gossip and all types of deception. Being truthful means living in harmony with reality, or recognizing and acting on the truth that we are sparks of spirit, servants of our divine friend. But how can we be a trustworthy individual in a loving relationship unless we're honest? And honesty means that we see everything as the Supreme's property. Therefore, we don't claim ownership. And this becomes easy when we offer everything to our divine friend, who then purifies wealth and possessions. And we're to be truthful with ourselves. We need to acknowledge and change the faults we come to see in ourselves and strive to live by spiritual principles even when it's inconvenient. Truthfulness also means not to cheat. Therefore, bhaktas don't gamble. When we gamble, we ask fortune to serve illusion. When truthful, we let destiny serve truth. Cleanliness, or socha, supports purity of the heart. It means we'll create a sacred space inside and out. Externally, we keep ourselves and our living spaces clean and eat pure foods. Internally, we fill the mind with spiritual content and make the heart healthy and pure by avoiding gossip and criticizing others, wasting time with materialistic media, and removing greed, anger, and pride by engaging in bhakti activities. Sex is allowed in marriage and is to be gradually reduced so that lust can be transformed into love through devotion to the Supreme. All the yoga systems, we have to note, recommend celibacy. Tapas, or austerity, refers to self-discipline. Discipline means choosing purpose over pleasure, long-term benefit over short-term benefit. It's the strength to say no to impulses that distract us from our higher goals. Bhaktas wake early to engage the auspicious time of day in meditation, and they limit harmful habits. Intoxication of all kinds reduces the ability to control the mind, senses, and emotions, and to make proper decisions. Though some people think psychedelics lead to spiritual states, this is a fallacy. Drugs are a material substance that acts on the material mind. Spiritual content cannot come from material things. Now, drugs can change mental states, but all mental states, whether they're clear or intoxicated, are mundane and do not give us access to spirit. Of course, altered states of consciousness may offer a glimpse into something beyond everyday experience, or in the psyche, and in some cases they can therapeutically assist with mental health issues. But beyond this, structured use drugs can only offer temporary material states that don't lead to permanent transformation or real spiritual states. They can only point to the truth of there being other levels of reality which we should pursue with clear consciousness. True spiritual realization isn't chemically induced. It arises through grace, discipline, and a genuine relationship with the divine. These 4 pillars of Dharma are so important for spiritual progress that bhakti practitioners refrain from eating animals to align with the quality of mercy. They refrain from gambling or speculative engagements to align with truthfulness. They abstain from sex outside of marriage to support cleanliness. And they refrain from taking all kinds of intoxicants as a healthy austerity to allow the true expansion of consciousness. But let's take note of something important. These prohibitions do not embody the full measure of any of these qualities. For instance, not eating meat is not the full expression of mercy. So when we contemplate how to embody these qualities, we'll look for all the ways we can express mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, and austerities in our daily lives. Rules protect, realization perfects. In addition to these 4 pillars, Bhakti has 4 other core values. They are devotion, humility, purity, and surrender. These 4 qualities manifest from even deeper spiritual realizations, and they elevate and give life to the 4 legs of Dharma. The 4 pillars, mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, and austerity, form the ethical foundation, and devotion, humility, purity, and surrender are the moods and goals behind a bhakti practice. Here's how the 2 lists of qualities relate to each other. Mercy becomes devotional compassion when it springs from a desire to bring others to the sweet absolute. It is mercy that extends beyond just trying to relieve someone's material suffering. This is mercy deepened by spiritual devotion. Truthfulness becomes not just honest behavior, humility, acknowledging the truth that we are servants of the original person and not independent enjoyers. Cleanliness supports and is supported by purity, both of body and heart, especially freedom from the enemies of the self, lust, envy, greed, and pride. Austerity is transformed into loving surrender to our divine friend. So in Bhakti, the 4 legs of Dharma are like a beautiful platform upon which we can place our devotion, purity, humility, and surrender to Sri Krishna and Sri Radha. These 4 qualities are essential for cultivating a sincere relationship with our divine friends. Without a central focus on our relationship with the sweet absolute and pleasing him and her, none of the qualities lead to liberation or true knowledge. If you've ever tried to develop a good quality, you might have discovered that it's quite difficult to always act and think in a way that is in integrity with your attempt. In fact, we'll encounter difficulties if we try to artificially impose these qualities without connection with our source through devotion or bhakti. A gardener cannot will a flower to bloom. She simply waters the root. Like watering the roots of a tree, when we serve Sri Krishna, the root of all existence, then all good qualities naturally manifest in our person. All these qualities develop naturally and easily when we steadily engage in the practices of bhakti, especially meditating on and chanting the holy names of the sweet absolute, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Constant remembrance of Sri Krishna through chanting purifies the heart and brings direct experience of the sweet absolute's presence. Over time, as one continues these practices sincerely under proper guidance, the heart becomes receptive to real knowledge, and deep attachment to the Supreme Person begins to manifest. Bhakti begins with sincerity, but it stands strong on the foundation of these timeless virtues. When we align our lives with mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, and austerity, not as rules, but as loving offerings to the divine, we start to live as our highest self. These qualities prepare the ground where devotion, humility, purity, and surrender can blossom, and where the soul can rediscover its original joy in service. Thanks for joining me in this episode of Exploring Bhakti. I hope this deeper look into Bhakti's ethical foundation gave you both inspiration and insight. If this episode helped you reflect or grow, let me know, please, in the comments below or through my website. And join me next time when we explore the 9 practices of Bhakti. Sarva Jana Bhagavata Sharanam Yantu Tasmin Sharane Eva Mangalasya Purnata. May all beings gently move toward the shelter of Bhagavan. In that shelter alone, auspiciousness finds its fullness.